Coach, hey, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. It is great to see you, my friend. It's been too long. Lots of things happening in Division III with your program, with the new friggin' stadium. So I'm glad you could join me today.
Yeah, happy to be on. I'm always happy to chat Division III soccer.
Yeah. And your office looks a lot better. I don't know what happened. Did you move? Like you got a nicer background? It's like cleaner.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a professional designer come in and sort it out.
Yeah.
My 5-year-old, I think.
Yeah, your 5-year-old sorted it out. That's fun. Hey, we got a lot to cover, so we'll just jump right into it. Just want to start with one question. How is the new stadium? Because I saw you training on there, and it just looks spectacular.
Yeah, it's great. We knew going into this past fall that we were going to be displaced because the new facility was going in place of our old existing field that we had, and so anyways, we knew there was going to be some just logistical challenges with the fall season that we had, and as I kept reminding the guys, it was going to be kind of some short-term chaos, so to speak, for something really long-term that was going to be worthwhile. And the stadium's fantastic. The setting where we had always played was always beautiful, but what they've done is kind of built all of the seating and press box and an area right into the hill that the field kind of sat below. But they've done it really thoughtfully because they've also created some grass areas that are along the hill that people can come and bring a blanket and run and sit and watch the game, or my 5-year-old can run around and so it's just gonna be a great place to see a game. Some of the landscaping and stuff is still being done. Lacrosse is in season now. We'll share with them. But the other big thing for me was if we were going to transition to a artificial surface that we tried to get as good of an artificial surface as we could. And I think we've done that. The surface plays incredibly. So we're excited to get going this fall with games and stuff. But training this spring has already been light years better than what we've had before.
Yeah. I'm just curious because of the way you described that. Now you're in the hill, or they sort of use that hill. Has the field shifted from where it was at?
The footprint of it hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is because of all of the construction and what they had to do with the stadium area and then the surrounding, like fencing and all these different things, they actually had to raise the level of the field probably about a foot or two.
Okay.
So that when you go by, if you didn't know it, you wouldn't think anything of it. But if you look closely and you know where to look, you could see where the field was sitting, and it was quite a bit lower, which is one of the big reasons why we had some of the drainage issues.
Yeah,
But anyways, the footprint though is the same.
yeah. Well, I'm showing pictures of it that I can find, so it's masterful. I mean, it's just what a great. I got to think it's going to be a great recruiting tool as well. Like, yep, this is where we play, and let them, soak it up. So, hey, and with that, the other question is, without me prompting, tell me how your season went from your perspective.
Yeah, from my perspective, this was year 3 of having kind of a real college soccer season under my leadership, and I think we always felt like we needed to make a step in the right direction as a program, and where that was going to show up more than anywhere else was in our biggest matches, which 12 months ago, or more than 12 months ago in 2022, I think when you and I spoke, one of the things I mentioned was in our biggest games, we just didn't get results, and we were close, but ultimately we didn't get over the hump, and that changed last year, which was great. So we took a good step. There was still more that I think we would have loved to have accomplished, but going into the year, we always knew it was going to be an interesting year. Like I said, with the facility, how it played out with us was we played 16 of our 22 games away from home, and probably more than any team in the country. So for us to really kind of manage the travel, the stress of being away from home, all those different things, and really when we were at home, we didn't really feel like it because it wasn't the facility that the guys are used to, and it was an older turf football field and whatnot. But anyhow, it was a great fall. I think what made it a special fall more than anything else was just the feeling that we had as a group every day. It was just a group that's really bought in and committed to each other, and they play for each other. It's something bigger than themselves, and so, anyways, when that stuff comes together, special things can happen, and I think there was a lot of special moments, which was fun.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at your schedule. I mean, you beat Ohio Wesleyan twice.
Hmm.
You won the NCAC, beating Kenyon, who had beaten you earlier. I mean, you have you beat John Carroll. I mean, some really signature wins, I would say. Just from a playing perspective, do you think that are you at a spot where you have them playing the way you want them to play, or is this still an evolution?
Somewhat an evolution, but at the same time, I would say the foundation of how we want to play has been set over the last few years. I think it's allowed us to um, kind of be the hardworking, competitive group that we are, and I think that'll always kind of be our foundation of just how we're set up and organized, and that has kept us in virtually every game we've played in 3 years. Um, and the thing that we had to address last year was finding goals in our biggest matches, which we did. And oftentimes we were finding multiple goals in our biggest matches. I think the next step for us is the volume of goals. So when it's 1-0 and we need to find that second goal to open the game up, or even most specifically like the 2-goal games when it's 2-0 and it's on that knife's edge of getting a little bit tricky at the end. If we find that third goal and you open it up, it can really help things. But I would say what I'm most proud of is, in 2020 in the fall, or I'm sorry, in 2021 in the fall, when that group showed up for preseason, we didn't have one player in our roster that had ever been on a winning college soccer team, and that included fifth-year seniors that came back for that fifth year. And in the last 3 years, there's 6 Division III programs that are in the top 40 of the liberal arts rankings that have had double-digit win seasons each of the last 3 years and have made at least 2 NCAA tournaments. We're one of the 6. It's Amherst, Franklin and Marshall, Washington and Lee, Middlebury, Kenyon College, and Denison. So a really exclusive group, and it's something that we're really proud of. But we also know I don't think we've even scratched the surface of how good I think we can be. So we're working at it, but it's been a lot of fun, and still more to do.
Um, the- what's your what was your sense around? So you get to you win the NCAC, you get into the tournament, you play Connecticut College in a really tight match, you end up losing 3-1. What are your thoughts about that game? Is there anything you learned, or
Yeah.
because that was close? Like I watched, I think before it went into OT, and I thought you had some opportunity there. That again, maybe that's the goal scoring thing that you were
Sure.
mentioning earlier. But yeah, what were your thoughts?
I just learned, and I guess it reinforced it, even though I've been, in Division III soccer for a number of years now and have been fortunate enough to be in a number of NCAA tournaments. I think a game against Con College was just reinforcing to me how special those opportunities are. And that was just an incredible game. We're at Franklin and Marshall, which was an awesome site and an awesome venue. Con's an incredible team, and I think seeing how hard our guys played, how well they executed many of the things that we wanted to do to disrupt some of what they're really good at, and they got us in moments certainly because they're really good, but we also got them. And so I just think it was an awesome NCAA tournament game that was back and forth. They had some wonderful chances that we had to make some great saves on. We had a breakaway in the last 20 seconds that we put just wide, and so either way, it was a great game. We'd love to have been playing the next night, obviously, but I think just seeing how much our program poured into the season, and especially that weekend, all you could do is just be really proud and pick those guys up, which I was happy to do after the match. So we go again, obviously now, and try to take that next step. But it was just a great game, and I think a really good platform for college soccer in Division Three.
I will say the contrast between that game, the Con College game, versus the NCAC final that you beat Kenyon your first year by 1-0, 1-0, right?
Yeah,
Night and day,
yeah,
like night and day. Like I would say, like I mean, you sat back against Kenyon that first year, and this time you guys were just like, we are hungry, we can play this game. It was such a dramatic difference, like the progress, right? But it was just so dramatic. That was my first thought, like, holy smokes, they've come far.
yeah. I appreciate that. It's a testament to how hard these guys work, which they work extremely hard, like many Division Three athletes all over the place. Um, but you're right. 2021, we were just kind of laying a foundation of how we wanted to compete, and I think we did a great job of that. And if we didn't lay that foundation down in 21, I don't think it allows us to be in the position we are now, where we feel like we can take more of the game to opponents. But that's been the evolution. Each year, I think we've taken a step on being more and more proactive in the matches that we've played. So that was
Yeah.
encouraging.
What what's sort of like the outcome do you think over the last couple of years, and in particular this year, from a recruiting perspective? I mean, is the talent pool improving, or the kids who are knocking on your door better players, do you think, than they were even just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, that's hard for me to say. All I can say is, Denison as an institution allows us to truly recruit some really talented, high academic student athletes, and that's been true since I've arrived. And I think all we've done for the last couple years is kind of have a standard for what we're looking for, and try to recruit to that standard. Certainly, I think as the profile of the institution improves, and we align with the trajectory of the college, like I think it does allow us to maybe, get in the door with some different kids in different parts of the country. Um, but by and large, I would say like we've been able to recruit a really high caliber kid the last few years that's been pretty consistent. And I think the type of kid that we've been lucky enough to attract here really do a wonderful job of creating the environment that I think we're looking for, that helps us with performance. So we'll keep doing that as best we can, and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm always interested in that, like a program. And you're right, Denison has a unique profile, right? Like you can't deny that. But you see programs that have the successful, they're growing the successful year, and then all of a sudden, like it's like the email floodgates open, and all these good, top quality kids who might not otherwise thought of Denison as an example
Sure.
suddenly are like, oh, Denison's on the radar.
There's some of that. I mean, I think where we see it more is when we go and see a kid at an event that maybe don't really have Denison on their radar when
Hmm.
we can present some things to them. I think it just perks up their interest maybe more than it did 3, 4 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Hey, I do want to ask before we talk about some of the Division III things. All right, so Travis Wall now at Kenyon. You have John Carroll joining the NCAC.
Yeah.
Not like it's going to get any easier for you, but I'm curious. What are your thoughts about the competitive of your conference? Obviously, Ohio Wesleyan always tough. College of Worcester always just workman's toughness. What are your thoughts about the competitiveness of the NCAC going the route it's going?
Yeah, John Carroll, as you know, will join a year from now in 2025 as a full member in the league, and at the certainly our if you just look over the last number of years, John Carroll, Ohio Wesleyan, Kenyon College have all been as good as certainly um, uh, any top program in the country by and large, and they've obviously been the top programs in our region for a very long time. Ohio Wesleyan, as you know, has been to more NCAA tournaments than any Division III program in the country. So when you're in an environment like that, it certainly means that we're going to have to sharpen our competitive edge more than we ever have. Thankfully, we've done that over the last few years. John Carroll and Denison, we've played every year that I've been here. There was a weather issue a couple years ago, and then this year we had a scheduling issue that we couldn't play a regular season match, but we'll play John Carroll in preseason. I just have tremendous respect for all of my peers in our league. Certainly, those three coaches in particular are tremendous. And we've always wanted to play against programs like that. Them coming in, it's going to be interesting. I would love to say that, for 2 out of the next 3 years we'd love to be in a position to win the conference tournament championship like we've had the last 3 years. I know that's just going to get more competitive for all of our programs to do. Um, but we're gonna work really hard to try to do it like I know they will. So it can only be a good thing in my mind. And it's going to be really great games. We've played John Carroll, as I said, every year. Basically, when I was at Case Western Reserve, we played them every year because they were across the street, and it was typically like a Wednesday in September, which is great. But playing them on a Saturday in October with 3 points on the line, I think will make it even better.
Yeah, I was joking with Coach Dayon. It's not like he goes from a relatively easy conference to a easier conference. It's like
Right.
you're going from the fire to the frying pan. Like choose your like. It's gonna be it'll just add that dimension. Like nobody in the NCAC will be able to really think that any of the games they're going to play are going to be easy or going to be we don't have to worry about this one so much,
Yeah,
um,
no doubt.
which I think will just make everybody stronger. So talking about strength, so and I'll let you sort of describe the scenario, but it just came out that the Division III championship committee is looking or has recommended this new selection criteria for tournaments, and it's not just soccer specific, if I understand it. It's for everybody, but the impacts of soccer obviously are pretty significant. So maybe you could maybe you could just give an overview of sort of what they're talking about, and then we could talk about the implications and all of that.
Yeah. I've probably spent way more time thinking about what's commonly referred to as pairwise or NPI as the other reference than I probably should. But I guess as a starting point, I would say this kind of got on my radar maybe in January when I stumbled across a YouTube video about what they're kind of considering. And I mean, I remember watching it and thinking like there's certainly merit to it, and it was interesting. And it just started me on this process of asking some questions. And then I saw some language come out after the NCAA convention that happened, where there was more discussion, and this ball clearly was rolling towards this being a real possibility to replace the current selection criteria with a computer algorithm. For those that don't know, our current selection criteria is for our team sports, and there's some variation here, but the basis of it is your regional advisory committees are looking at primary criteria, which includes win-loss percentage, strength of schedule, and results versus ranked opponents. They're ranking teams in the region, and then the national committees are taking those rankings and using them to select a national tournament. And so this would replace all of that. And so anyhow, as somebody that was on the National Soccer Championship Committee, I chaired the committee twice. I'm kind of in a unique position where I've seen how this process works. You know, I've been in the room when they've built brackets at the national office in Indianapolis, and there's many other coaches that have been on our national committee that also kind of understand some of this. But by and large, I would say the process of what they're going towards, it hasn't been fully explained or shared. And so anyways, this selection criteria would be moving towards a computer algorithm that does what you might commonly see in Division I with RPI or something, where you are ranked 1 through however many schools participate in that sport. And so for team sports, this would apply to obviously men's and women's soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, football, men's and women's basketball. I'm trying to think who else, softball, baseball, all the team sports, they would be using this same criteria. And as a starting place, Paul, I'm looking at it through the lens of I've been in the room. I understand how competitive it is to make the national tournament. There are 415-ish men's soccer programs, as an example. There's some that have dropped programs or have closed, unfortunately, but roughly around there. And when you take out the 41 automatic qualifiers, you're left with whatever the number is, 370 something. And we have to select, and the national committees have to select the most deserving teams out of that 370. And there was 22 at-large Pool C bids last year. So you got to be one of 22 out of 370 plus. So it's super competitive. And I'll be the first to admit, we as coaches would love to make sure that there is an unbiased, transparent, and objective process for that to happen. And if there was a computer algorithm that did that, I think we'd all be for it, as long as it's rolled out in an appropriate way. I would say that the thing that we're struggling with, and I speak for a number of coaches, our coaches association, advisory council group that I'm a part of, and others. I think the biggest frustration that we have right now is that this hasn't felt like it's been done in a thorough due diligence, with thoughtful consideration, and most importantly, with broad feedback from the membership. As an example, I also am the Division III representative for our rules committee, which we just proposed a couple of rule changes related to timekeeping, substitution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When we have a rule change proposal, before we even consider it, there's a year or two worth of research and data that's done. We are surveying coaches, conference commissioners, officials, athletic directors. We are surveying them, gathering that feedback, making a recommendation, and then asking for feedback. And if it's a year like this year and the feedback comes back and it tells us we might need to tweak something, we consider it, we make a tweak, and then we open it up for even more feedback, which is what we're doing now. I've asked the championship committee specifically, will there be a comment period? All that stuff is called a comment period. And I've asked specifically, will there be a comment period for this change? And they have told me no. This is coming from the championship committee, which oversees all the sport championships. And then you can pull up the roster of who's on that committee. They're well-intended people. I don't mean to say that they're not, but there's very few coaches on that committee. And this is also coming from the NCAA championship staff liaisons, the people that are helping coordinate with the committees to kind of execute our championships. And again, it's all well intended, and I think what they want is consistency across the criteria that the different sports are using, there to be transparency, there to be objectivity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Among other things, the issue that I think many of us have is this is intended to create more transparency and objectivity. Having said that, it is an algorithm that nobody can compute. There's no way to understand the data. For example, a big part of this process is the way that teams' profiles are adjusted. So if you play a schedule of 18 games, your profile might only be looked at with a couple of games taken away. So perfect example, 2022, Catholic University makes the NCAA tournament. They're the last team selected into the tournament, and they make it over a team in their league, Drew University. Under pairwise, Drew would have been in the tournament, Catholic would not, which that's fine. It's at the end. It's the back end of the tournament. It's a coin flip almost at that point, which is fine. But when you could debate it, totally fine. When you pull up the pairwise data and you select both of those teams, there's a team in their league, Susquehanna, that each of them have played that did not count for that game. Got adjusted for Catholic, but not for Drew. Why that happens, all of us would love to know. We have no idea why one game counts for one team and not for the other. There's an algorithm that's selecting these things, and so I think there are some issues just with rollout. There's issues mostly with process. This is happening at lightning speed without thorough due diligence. The NCAA Champs Committee will say, and they're not wrong, they have engaged the sport committees and asked for feedback, but that level of engagement is very limited. I know that this process was moving down the tracks prior to sport committees even getting data. The sport committees kept saying show us the numbers. At least men's soccer did. And each time it was either limited data or they didn't get it in enough time. They've actually taken the access to the data away, so nobody can even see it, and that's unfortunate. I've spoken to a chair of a prominent sport committee, and he has told me verbatim that when they're providing a recommendation to their NCAA staff, that they haven't even dove into the numbers in any thorough way, but they just felt like they had to do it. So I think there's just some things that don't totally align. I mean, in the championship paperwork that they, or in the report that they just recently released that I referenced on Twitter, and as a starting place, this is about awareness. I'm happy to see that my thread has gotten almost 80,000 views, and people need to know about it. In my most recent tweet where I posted the language directly from the championship committee, it even says that it's clear that there's more work to be done, but they feel like this should happen for fall 2024. And what I asked is, what is the benefit? They feel like there is a benefit. I would love to know what that is. And if there is a benefit, let's share it. And if there is data out there, which there is, share it so people know what we're getting ourselves into. So I think there's just a lot of issues here. Some of the narratives that are out there that you'll hear is, well, this is the same process that hockey uses, and it works really well. I mean, anybody can Google pairwise hockey and see that that's not universally true. There's a lot of people upset with the pairwise process in hockey, but most importantly, their algorithm's different than the algorithm that we'll use. So that's one. The other narrative that's out there is, well, we've looked at we've run the numbers. The teams that are getting into the tournament in the last few years in these different sports are virtually the same that have got in under pairwise, which for men's soccer, I can tell you specifically that's not the case. There's been anywhere from 3 to 5 teams over the last 3 years that would have been different. And one of those teams, as I referenced in my thread, is Washington and Lee, who made the NCAA tournament, which is interesting.
That's a shocking one, right? Like that's the one where you're like, wait, how did that happen? How would that happen under that?
Right, and I'll talk about that for sure. But the other one, and I can kind of pause here, is two things. One, if the teams that are getting in by their own admission are virtually the same teams using this algorithm, then they're in another way saying the process that we have now is working. And what I'm seeing is we have they're giving us something, and they're giving us an answer to a question that the membership hasn't even asked. And so that's interesting. The other thing I would say is, even if the teams were virtually identical that got into the tournament field, that's one small piece of the puzzle. The next question I would ask is, show me the bracket, because all those teams are ranked. It's a fully seeded bracket now, and I think bracketing is going to be incredibly affected by this, more than most people will know. So there's just a lot to it. I think transparency is really important. And there's a reason why a few years ago that the sport committees, men's soccer in particular, pushed for that final ranking on the last day of Selection Sunday to get released with data sheets. And people could look at it, just like people can look at the championship manual and figure out, how do you calculate strength of schedule? Well, you follow the formula that they give you. It's not terribly complex. Mm-hmm. You know the rules of engagement, and this changes that pretty dramatically. And I'll stop here. I would say we all want something transparent and objective, and we don't want bias. We just want something that works, this does not work in how it's constructed. I would love for this just to kind of slow down a little bit. Let's spend the next 12 months piloting it and tweaking it and have it reflect the best teams that get into the NCAA tournament. And I think that's what I would hope we all want.
Yeah, almost like run it parallel, right? And just sort of
Mhm.
validate and tweak where necessary. All right, so a bunch of stuff. First of all, with your permission, I took your Twitter thread, and
Right.
I'm with this video. I will put it on d3soccer.fans as a post, so there it'll be it'll be there. So that outlines all of your points.
Right.
So there's that. The two questions I have, and you asked yourself the same question, was the first one is, what I don't understand what problem they're trying to solve, right? Like, what was the what?
Again, it's not that it's not well intended, and there could be some merit to it. I think what they want at a high level for the people that oversee championships is that they want relative consistency across the different sport committees. So, for example, if men's basketball, women's basketball, and soccer have the same criteria, which we essentially do, and the other sports do as well, they want that criteria to be applied in a similar manner by their different sport committees. The and I would submit that by and large that's happening. Maybe it's not in isolated cases, but I think those are things where that can be cleaned up. But I would say that's the issue that they would tell you. And and I would say what's again, which doesn't always align in some of the hypocrisy of what's happening. It wasn't but a couple years ago that they were very concerned about um, regional equity to the tournament, essentially, right? So like teams in the South and the West and these other places that can't get quality games or can't get ranked opponents or whatever it is. So we went from 8 to 10 um, regional committees, which it helped expand that a bit. Well, this gets away from that. And you could go as far as to say this probably wouldn't happen, but it could. This algorithm could spit out, the top teams from New England and what used to be the East region with New York or something, and you could have, let's say, all of the at-large selections coming from one or two regions. So that's just how it could be implemented. So I think that doesn't always align. Anyhow, I think there's some other things. I would also say if we talk about implementation, so the process piece, I think, I've covered a little bit, but the implementation of this and how this will actually look for us is interesting. I've been reading the boards as well that have been discussing this on D3 boards. I think there's a narrative out there that, oh, well, this will just reel in the NESCACs and the UAAs or whatever is out there. I don't think that'll actually happen. If you look at the data, those programs all play great schedules and they win a lot of games. And for the teams that play great schedules and win a lot of games, you're always going to be fine in this algorithm. I would say it's kind of that next tier that is going to be most affected. And where it gets most affected is teams that play a really balanced, rigorous schedule and may not have the same volume of wins of teams that don't schedule that rigorously. And those teams I see are benefited with this algorithm. Yeah, so we've just shifted really quickly from that being a big consideration of access and regional access, to potentially this algorithm could spit out teams from one or two regions, and that makes up all of the pool Cs. So, lastly, about access, the access piece we've addressed in Division Three. It's called our automatic qualifiers. So really, the pool Cs are, in my mind, should be going to the our, our best teams. It's the teams that There should be the highest standard of evaluation, and I think the implementation of this algorithm, the way it's currently constructed, isn't doing that. So I'll give you a couple of examples, which I think help paint the picture. Obviously, we've talked about Washington and Lee. So Washington and Lee, as a quick reminder for everybody, not only made our Final Four this year out of 415 plus programs, they played the 10th hardest schedule in the country, objectively the 10th. And not only did they do that, but they had 5 ranked results. They won 70% of their games. They weren't what I would consider like the sexiest resume. And had they been a little bit better in a couple of games, like then they would have been the first, second, third team off the board. Fair enough. I don't think anybody would argue that maybe they're in kind of that next tier of teams to get into the tournament out of 22 Pool Cs. But for them not to be one of 22 Pool Cs would be absolutely unprecedented. Not to mention, we know that they did well. Not to mention, we have data around, which I'm going to dive into in my next rabbit hole I go down in the next week or so, of what teams do well in the tournament. We have historical data that can tell us that. Of what does that profile look like? Like I would submit that profile looks like teams that win a lot of games, play a great schedule, and beat good teams. And the data can support that. And it can also support the teams that maybe aren't as successful in the tournament. And I would submit it's those teams that might win a lot of games but don't have the same rigor of challenge across their schedule. Those teams are getting in every year. It's our AQs predominantly. So anyways, a couple more examples. There's a team that would have been 22nd in the pairwise ranking, so they're comfortably in the tournament. This past year, I won't name who they are. 40% of their schedule, and again, you're ranked 1 through 400. 40% of their schedule was played against teams 250 plus. Their strength of schedule was a 542, which would have been among the lowest to make the NCAA tournament in recent years. Their best result, they had 2 quality draws. No significant result. I mean, not only are they not a bubble team, they're safely in the tournament. Another team played almost in the pairwise. Another team that would have made it under pairwise this year, they would have been 31st. 48% of their schedule was teams 200 plus. Their best win was number 62. They would have gotten in over Washington and Lee. They would have gotten in over John Carroll, who played a 547 a 609 SOS and a 547 with multiple ranked wins. John Carroll, as an example, had wins against number 28, 44, 76, draws against 34, 36, played a 574, won 70% of its games. They would have not gotten in over a team that played a 541, 40% of their schedule against 200 plus, and their best win coming against 62 with no other wins in the top 100 or results in the top 100. This goes on and on. Mount Union is one which I'll put out there because David's a good friend of mine. I know you're a Mount Union guy. I don't think anybody would argue Mount Union was a unique case this year. They had wins against Case. They had wins against Calvin. Their quality of wins were as good as anybody in the country. They would have been 11th in the country using pairwise. Now, if they get into the tournament, no problem. Fair enough. Them being 11 means that they're in comfortably, they're hosting, etc. And why are they 11? They played 20 games. 8 of their games have been removed from their profile. And the rationale is 8. So 40% of their schedule is removed. It's wiped away. And the rationale is, well, if you have to play a couple of teams in your league that have down years, as an example, that shouldn't overly punish you because they have a really bad year. Fair enough. I think we all get it. I would submit that those games still exist and it's a part of your rigor, and we should look at the total body of work. But philosophically, I can understand. But this applies for non-conference games as well. Their total strength of schedule was a 529, which again would have been among the lowest in the country. For context, John Carroll, Ohio Northern, and Otterbein, who all have to play some of the same teams in the OAC that just didn't have as good of a season, all played a 574, a 604, and a 562 SOS respectively. They went out of their way to try to challenge themselves, and not only is Mount Union in this specific example, and you could just wipe away Mount Union and replace the name of the team with somebody else. But that example is an example of a template moving forward where you're not penalized really at all. You're actually being rewarded by it. And maybe you could say, okay, this is an aberration, right? 2023 is an aberration. 2022, the team that would have been fifth overall in the country, their best win was number 38. They had no other win in the top 80. They played a 518 strength of schedule. It was a profile that isn't competitive in the country across any of the other profiles. And what you'll hear them say is, well, you can change the dials and you can make adjustments to your algorithm. It's in the championship stuff. The sport committee changed every dial they could. You could not move this team off fifth. So the changes that they make are so marginal. The algorithm is benefiting because they're removing bad matches. So 22, that's one. In 2021, zero top 50 wins for the team that was seventh in the country. Zero. Not one win in the top 50. They didn't have one ranked result or one ranked win. If you looked at the results versus ranked from that year, they played a 540. It goes on. 2021, the team that's number 9 in the country didn't play one team in the top 40. They played a 543 SOS across the board. Their best win was a number 72. So these aren't outliers. These are examples. And when you ask the NCAA staff, oh, this is an outlier, etc., I've tried to tell them, we will all be outliers. We are smart coaches. We will take the data and the algorithm and schedule to it. And I think the formula, and again, they've taken away access to the data. So I think it would be helpful to really dive into it to really formulate this better. But my initial impression is this. You will always need to play a handful of good games, whatever that is. You know, for most leagues, you're going to have one or two or three built into your conference schedule, maybe more depending on the conference. You're going to want to have 2 or 3 in your non-conference. And what we've historically done is with that next grouping of games, you try to create a balanced, rigorous schedule with teams that do well. And I think there's less benefit for that. That next tier of games that you would generally schedule against teams that are 500 or above 500 or whatever that may look like, there's no benefit playing them because they're good teams. They could beat you on the day. You're better off playing a team that maybe isn't as competitive, and that game will be removed. And if you're going to play a midweek game, if it's me as an example, and we have to play a midweek Wednesday game before we play John Carroll on the weekend to get our 17, 18 games in, I will play a team that I think we have an opportunity to maybe play more guys, or it's not going to be as challenging as it would be against somebody else. So the practical implication of this is going to be significant.
Yeah. Well, like you said, right? Like, what did everybody start to focus in on when, well, this is, I mean, years ago, but was, okay, strength of schedule matters. So what you saw coaches amp up their strength of schedule as best they could. So, right, because that's the way another way to get into the tournament.
Right.
You'll
Yeah,
do the
and I would
same
say
thing,
this.
right? Like you'll be like, well, if strength of schedule doesn't matter, and you could conceivably have 8 games removed from your schedule for this ranking purpose. Criminy. Like I would, like
I'll
you're
go a step
yeah.
further. The number one team in men's soccer in 2023, they played 20 games. Their profile was evaluated on 4 matches, so 80% of their schedule got wiped away. And and again, like they've told me in a broader way of like why that happens. Having said that, digging into the math, like nobody can tell me, nobody can make me understand or help me understand how that happens. The last 2 things I would say um, is this: um, the this is transformative. I would hope that we slow down a little bit, help people see what this is, get broad feedback from a number of different constituencies, and help coaches understand it. Because I think what we all want is a championship that has been reflective of what's been happening in the last number of years. And our championship has been tremendous. You can always quibble about, a team or two that maybe should get in or shouldn't get in.
All right.
That's fair.
Western Connecticut one year, Mount Union last year. I mean, you can make the debates, right? Like you could,
That
and
happens
that's
every year.
fine. Every year, you're going to have that. You're
Yeah.
going to have that
Now,
one or
but
two
the
teams.
rules of engagement have been set. I think we
Yeah.
follow it. I would also say when you're evaluating 400 teams, it's hard. This isn't easy work. But I'll flip it another way. And I've tried to make this analogy. In college, it seems like these college admission directors are getting applications from every kid that has a 3.8 and a 3.9 anymore. And how do you evaluate that? You evaluate it by class rigor and what they do. This is the same process. If you're
Yeah.
up for selection, if you've had a good year, everybody's winning games,
Yeah.
every single one. Now, how do you evaluate that? You evaluate that by who
Yeah.
are they playing, who are they beating,
Yeah.
who are they getting results against,
Yep.
and
Body of work.
it's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
if there's an evaluation tool out there that can best help us do that, I think we would all like to see it. And I would personally, I'll gladly submit. I'll help them do it if they ever wanted to. And I think there's well-intended people that are doing that work. The rollout and the execution and what we've been given, I think just misses the mark right now.
Yeah. I don't understand, and I'll just say this. I know you're on a time crunch. I just don't understand, quite frankly, how any ranking, any legitimate ranking, excludes games that you played. I don't understand. I don't know.
Yeah,
Fundamentally, philosophically, again, I go back to you judge a team, and I try to do this with players' body of work. Like I don't care. I don't necessarily care what happens game to game. I want to look at what did you do over the 20 game season or whatever the case may be, so I could get a better understanding of who you are. Did you improve? Did you not improve? That sort of record wise. I don't understand how removing teams makes that a better selection process. And in Mount Union's case, as much like if they removed 8 games, you might as well. That's almost the entire OAC. Like you're there's 9 team, one more team, and it's basically like you nullified the entire conference, right? Competitive.
no
I
doubt.
just don't
Yeah, it's
understand.
about body of work, and I would
Yeah,
love to see an instrument that does that and evaluates
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But what I'd love to see even more is a process that's inclusive,
yeah,
that has taken that has had thorough due diligence, that has taken careful consideration, and broadly is considerate of the membership.
yeah. All right. Hey, I know you got a meeting. If you're okay with it, I'll ping you maybe, and maybe we keep this conversation going in a couple months. We pick it up again and we just talk about this because I do think it's pretty important. And like you said, I think it is transformative, not necessarily in the way they're anticipating. And so, at least from a soccer perspective, I don't know the others, but
Right.
Coach, thank you very much for this. Really do appreciate it. And like I said, it was great talking to you.
Thanks. Have a good one.